Hello everyone, welcome to Driving Production. In this episode, we're going to be fixing the exhaust drone on the Mazda 3. Drone is something that I think affects a lot of people with either aftermarket exhaust or that did any type of modification to their exhaust. And sometimes I think it can be quite difficult to get rid of it. I did some research on the topic and it seems that there's so many different ways or different opinions on what exactly can fix the exhaust drone. So after doing quite a bit of research, I found was to do different exhaust tips. Now there's different options. I also saw that some people suggest doing what they call a J-pipe, so that the sound frequencies and the sound waves bounce off and kind of cancel out the exhaust drone or those sound waves. And other options are to do some exhaust tips. Some people claim that it does affect the exhaust sound, the exhaust drone, I should say, also. So that was my next option. If this doesn't work, I think I would step up to doing a J-pipe. One option that the reason I got this one is to lengthen the exhaust tips out of the car. So the exhaust tips that are from the factory, it looks like, I would say they're about half an inch to an inch in the bumper. So I'm thinking maybe the frequencies and the sound kind of vibrates through the rear of this section of the car. It doesn't fully go out of the car, but instead it gets trapped underneath, which results in drone in the cabin. So that's one of the idea of if actually putting an exhaust tips on it works. The other exhaust tip I got to test out is this DC Sport resonated exhaust tips. I've seen a lot of mixed reviews on resonated tips, and it doesn't seem that I can find a clear answer. So some people say that a resonated tip will increase the actual volume of your exhaust. That's why I've seen some people just do a resonated tip on a stock exhaust, and they say that it makes it louder, while other people claim that it quiets it down because it adds an extra resonator or silencer in the exhaust. So that'll be interesting to see if it does anything different. As per those exhaust tips, I just got them off Amazon. Really, I just got these exhaust tips to test them out, so I didn't went with anything crazy expensive. But apart from that, I'll do a base test with the stock exhaust in the car. So let's hop in the car, do some different tests with the stock exhaust, see the different decibel. Then I'll move to the non-resonated tip, and then to the actual resonated tip. So now I'm in the Mazda 3 with the stock Mazdaspeed exhaust and the stock tips on it. So there's a few tests I wanted to do with the different exhaust tips to see if it affected the sound. One, we'll just check at idle. So right now the car is warm. It's idling at 750 RPM, or give or take. I want to rev the car. I'll do a pull with half throttle, 60 to 80 kilometers on 4th gear, and then also an acceleration 0 to 100. Kind of compare the data that we're going to get from there with different exhaust tips to see if it affects the sound. So first off, at idle at about 700 or so RPM, it's idling at a pretty steady 65 decibel. Now if I rev it, it's at a steady 78 decibel. So I'm at 60 kilometers an hour. I'm about a little bit less than 2,000 RPM. I'll just go half throttle, make it to 80. hear it through the camera, but there is quite a bit of drone there. Okay, so to keep it as consistent as possible with the sound, with the shifting and everything, I'm just gonna put it in drive and keep it there. So I rev it to about 1500 RPM. I'm not trying to reach 0 to 100 as fast as possible. It's just to have the steadiest feedback from the car as possible. Okay, so just did a 0 to 100, and you see the max decibel rating we've hit so far is still at 90 decibel with this exhaust tip. Now I'm not sure how much the decibel ratings, or the decibel amount I should say, are actually going to change, because I think drone is more of a frequency than how high the volume is. So it'll be interesting to see what the other exhaust tips react. So I just installed the non-resonated exhaust tips. I just put them on non-permanent, just really to do the exhaust test. If I were to keep them, this is not the permanent state, I would leave them on, because obviously they're sticking out way too much out of the rear bumper. But I put them on in a way that I feel comfortable doing the exhaust test. Let's hop in the car, let's go do the non-resonated aftermarket exhaust tips to see if it affects the sound. So I just drove from my house to this road with the non-resonated exhaust tips, and I was actually pretty shocked to see how much of a difference it actually made in the exhaust sound. Just from driving it a little bit, it felt like the exhaust was like way quieter. The exhaust drone was not even barely there anymore. And another thing I noticed is that with the stock exhaust tips, it sounded almost as if the exhaust was leaking at the back. That's the sound that came out. But now it's almost as if the sounds like really clear, like it's coming out from like a proper exhaust system. So it's quite interesting. We'll just do the few tests. At idle, I'm at same 700 RPM, and I'm around 61, 62, 63 decibel. Could have affected by the fan last time though. Yeah, so maybe the 60 something, 65 I think decibel from the stock exhaust might have been affected by the fans that were on, because I don't see much of a difference. I would say it's definitely a different tone. I think it's higher pitch now that it has the exhaust tips on it. It's less of a droning sound. I don't remember the decibel on the stock exhaust, how much it was, but I think it was about 78 for this one from what I can see. Okay, so now let's do fourth gear. I'm going down to 60. A little under 2000 RPM, about half throttle. So you can still hear the exhaust with the exhaust tips on, but I gotta say, like, the exhaust note, the droning, like, there's still a little bit that's there, but I'm actually quite surprised. So just bringing them from underneath the bumper, how much it actually affected the exhaust sound. So now we'll do the 0 to 100. Again, I'll just leave it in drive. Brake boost to about 1500, and then all the way to the ground. And 100. So just doing from the 0 0 to 100, quite surprised from the different sound that actually comes out from the exhaust. Just from doing the exhaust tip, it changed the note a fair amount. It's definitely higher pitch with the exhaust tip. Let's go put the other exhaust tips on. So I just finished installing the resonated DC Sport exhaust tips. I gotta say it went pretty well. For these one, I actually had to cut the OEM exhaust tip off. I was hoping to just remove the OEM tip on top of the tailpipe, but I actually had to cut it off. So that's what I did. Apart from that, it goes on pretty easy. 3 bolts to it. I think they're 3/8. 10 mil was a little bit big on them. Yeah, that's how they look. Let's go for a drive. Let's see how it compares to the other tip. I am now in the Mazda 3 with the resonated exhaust tip from DC Sport. So from what I could see just driving from my house to here, this sounded similar to the stock tips, to be honest. It was a deeper sound than the non-resonated tips, but the drone was still there, if not the same amount of drone that it had before with the OEM tips. So far for the resonated tips, it's not looking too good. So just at idle, same engine's warm at 700 RPM. It's about the same as the exhaust, the stock exhaust at 65 decibel, 65, 66. And then now if I rev it, I'm still at the same roughly amount of decibel at 78. So now we'll do the 60 to 80. Do it half throttle, in 4th gear. So still a fair amount of drone. I'd say this exhaust setup is very similar to the stock exhaust that was on the car. So for a resonated tip, I guess it kind of makes sense that a lot of people that do resonated tips, from what I can see, it's usually something people do on their OEM exhaust. They just want a little deeper sound. So we'll do the 0 to 100. So I'll just rev it to 1500 and go. Doing the 0 to 100 kilometers an hour, I can see that the sound is a lot deeper. So it's a lower volume, not as high pitch as the non-resonated exhaust tip, but I can feel like the exhaust drone is it's still there. So that's the results with the 3 different exhaust tips. I'm actually pretty shocked at how much of a difference it actually makes on the exhaust sound, the exhaust level, how deep it affects it, or how higher pitch it is. So yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting. Okay, so I just wanted to go over kind of final thoughts on the exhaust tip that I installed. I ended up buying another set of exhaust tips. The twin tips that I was probably gonna go with, when I ended up putting them in more, they were rubbing against the bumper. The fitment wasn't ideal, so I ended up just returning them and getting a different set. So this is the set I ended up getting. So they are slanted, so it's what I wanted. So they kind of follow the lines of the bumper, because if they were straight, one side would have been sticking out more than the other. So that way it kind of follows the line of the bumper. Overall, the I think it's a good way to start if you're trying to eliminate exhaust drone. Is it going to remove everything, or is it going to work on every car? Probably not, but I think definitely it's a good starting point just to lengthen the exhaust tip, to change the exhaust tip. I think it's surprisingly a good way to start removing the exhaust drone, and that's definitely something I've learned with this experience. Another thing to consider is it actually changes the exhaust tone. I wouldn't say it changes the volume, so how loud and the decibel rating, I didn't think it really affected it with the test we did. I think it's more like the frequency, different tone of the exhaust, so it does change the exhaust tone. Now, I know we did the test with different exhaust tips. I'd say that this one is very similar to the twin tip non-resonated, but again, being a larger diameter, it did change to a little bit of a deeper tone. As a catback overall, I think it's pretty good. I like the setup where it is now. The drone was considerably lower just by lengthening the exhaust tip, bringing it out of the bumper. I'd say it's sitting about an inch out of the bumper instead of about an inch in the bumpers. I still wanted the exhaust to be a little bit quieter, as it is our daily driver. It's definitely an exhaust that I was looking to have it more tame, just to hear a bit of exhaust noise. So what I ended up doing is get some exhaust silencer, installed them. They are 60 millimeters. With the exhaust silencer, I think the exhaust tone is exactly where I wanted it, or where I was hoping to get it by just doing the catback with the Mazdaspeed catback. So this is what it sounds like with the exhaust silencer. Overall, I think it's a great mod. I think the exhaust tip is definitely something to look into, and changes the look of your car too. So a lot of positive to just doing the exhaust tip, and surprising results also. So let me know what you think in the comments, if it's something you've tried before, or if it's something you'd like to do on your own car to try to eliminate the drone. Thanks for watching again, and we'll see you next time.